Welcome to Bake to the Future. The wholesale baking industry mixes tradition and innovation to feed the world and the economy, generating some major dough while employing nearly 800,000 people in the U.S. We bring you a fresh take on the latest trends and issues impacting the baking sector through exclusive insights and conversations. Brought to you by the American Bakers Association, who will take you bake to the future.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Haley Blumenreich.
And I'm Katie Jewell.
And in this episode, we are excited to bring you the rest of our conversation with food industry CEOs Julie Anna Potts from the North American Meat Institute and Michael Dykes from the International Dairy Foods Association. Led by Robb MacKie, APA's CEO, this CEO forum will focus on what our guests are seeing on the horizon, including new innovations, health and nutrition trends, and the importance of food supply safety, and how their industries are tackling food insecurity and the school meals program.
If this is the first time you are tuning in, I recommend listening to part 1, where we talk with our guests about how the dairy and meat industries have fared during the coronavirus, and they reflect on what's happened regarding workforce challenges, food shortages, trade, and the differing experiences for companies who do food service and retail. You can listen to part 2 on its own, but part 1 will give you more context, and you will hear our guest answer our first question in the Great Bake Debate. Now, on to the show.
What are the types of innovations have your members been implementing, particularly with an eye towards the future? And which ones do you think might stick as we come, and get into the new normal post-COVID?
Well, I, not necessarily as it relates to testing and those kind of things, but I think in terms of innovation going forward, technology will continue to be important to our industry, but technology has been turbocharged as a result of COVID-19. What can we automate? Well, we have had difficulties getting workers as we had to expand production and across many of our members, finding people, even though we have record unemployment, finding people that want to work. Some complications with the unemployment insurance of $600 a week. Finding an attractive salary that will entice people to come to work that haven't been working in the industry. I would say also, while I'm talking about workers, I'd be remiss if I didn't say the workers across the dairy industry, and I think it's true across both the bakers and the meat industry, did their patriotic duty and did live up to the definition of essential. They took it seriously. They were committed. They showed up for work, and our members had the philosophy that if we provide all the safeguards we can put in place so that when they're at work, it should be the safest part of their day, our workers will do their part and show up. And I would say they did it, and they did it in spades. So I think that's an important thing for everyone to know, especially those inside our industry, but outside our industry. Going forward in terms of innovation, I think technology is as I said, is turbocharged. I think we're going to see a greater use of digital and analytics. I think we're going to see a digital transformation of our industry. For those who've not done lean transformations, I think that will be one of the next things they do. We'll see more automation, where we can get more done with machines and machine learning. So to me, that's one of the things that we will see for sure coming out of this. Many other things I could talk about, but if you ask me about one new innovation, the whole spectrum around technology.
Yeah, Rob, I would echo just what Michael said. I mean, we have a number of equipment manufacturers that are members of our organization, our meat industry supply group. And I've had some very fascinating conversations with maybe a dozen or so of our largest companies who supply equipment, robotics, and those things are on top of everyone's mind. And so very interesting, because you think about some of those things, they're not going to be quick fixes either. They're going to be long-term solutions for big investment, changes to physical plant, but just a whole different way of thinking about the workforce that you need to be able to run with more sophisticated equipment, and in some cases, just it's a huge turnover in terms of the type of people you need, to be working for you. And so I think that those are more long term, especially when it comes to robotics. You don't build a robot overnight, I am told. So those solutions that are customized for each individual company or plant or operation are going to take some time. But I think that those conversations are taking place 7 days a week now.
I would add on to that, Rob. I said back at our annual dairy meeting back in January, before this ever happened, that our industry would see more change in the next 5 years than we've seen in the last 15. That was before COVID. I believe that to be ever more so true today, only accelerated. And so I think in the last 6 months of this year, business leaders are going to have their teams together and say, okay, we've gone through the crisis. We kept thinking maybe next week, next month, this thing would kind of get back to some semblance of normal. I think there's now has been and will continue to be a recognition that we need to take a fundamental look at our business, our supply chains, our workforce, our level of competitiveness, our budgets. And I think between now and December 31st, companies will be planning for 2021 and thinking about what is our business platform going forward. Are we structured properly? Do we have the right people in the right places? Do we have the financial resources allocated to the right places? And are we positioned to be globally competitive going forward? I think that will drive consolidation. I think it'll drive innovation. I think it'll make many, many changes, and I know it will in our industry on a go-forward basis.
Michael, I think you raise a great point, and the word that I've used, I completely agree with you, and Juliana as well. The word that I've used is COVID has been an accelerant. So, it's like adding fuel, high octane fuel to some of the trends and the directions that were happening. They were already there, at least behind the scenes. And I think, again, whether it's, innovation in process and logistics, every single ABA owner and CEO that I have talked to has said that everything is on the table. They're looking at everything and how they conduct the business. And I think, there are going to be some core things that remain. But I also think that we're going to wake up in 5 years and go, wow, that industry that existed pre-COVID doesn't exist anymore. And it's probably going to happen in a lot of surprising ways. One of the things that I fully anticipate is our retail partners that we work closely with, Leslie at FMI and Greg at National Grocers Association. Their business model is going to change. And obviously, if that changes, that's going to have a significant impact on all of us as suppliers through the retail supply chain. So I think, one of the things I hear from our members is we need to stay very close to our retail customers and the organizations so that we can, hopefully help our members see ahead of the curve. And again, I think it's going to happen in ways we can't even anticipate sitting here today.
Yeah, the retailers are members of ours as well. Most all the major retailers, because they manufacture at least portions of their dairy case. So all of the major retailers most all of them are members for that reason. I think we'll see increased consolidation, vertical integration across those, and then just the way consumers interact with retailers to get their food. E-commerce will clearly is here to stay and will continue to grow and become an even more competitive space.
No, go ahead, Juliana.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rob. I think there just is boundless opportunity, and it's so. I think your word, accelerant is a good one. Um, I think understanding consumer mindset and looking at the trends that we certainly would have seen maybe more slowly. So all of the good work that each of our organizations and together we've done in the food and beverage industry to look at what consumers are doing is now just that much more, I think, intense. And so I think, continuing to, as you put it, stay ahead of the curve with our members means all along the supply chain, we are communicating more effectively with each other. And so that is, I think, a demand that our members are putting on us. This whole switch from food service to retail and has created, I think, needs for many of our members to diversify their channels. And so I have recently become familiar with the term omni-channel and trying to figure out how we can, as an organization and group of organizations, assist our members in taking advantage of all the opportunities that COVID has presented.
Rob, you asked about going forward, the role of innovation. As I step back and I think about what Juliana just said, omni-channel, and I think about your comments, the accelerant. I think the whole business environment in which your members, Juliana's members, our members all operate, that whole landscape's going to change. I mentioned technology as one, the different channels, a different one. I think other things, trust. Trust is going to become extremely important, more so going forward than it has in the past, because I think there's going to be greater scrutiny on those of us that are in business today. We need to make sure that we can live up to the things we say we're doing, and we need to be doing the things that the consumer, who is all of our boss, we need to make sure we're doing the things the consumer values, because we're going to be under intense scrutiny. And if we're going to maintain our license to operate, we're going to have to make sure that we have credibility in our messaging. I think we're going to enter an era of reform. We're going to, whatever it has been in the past, we're probably going to reform it. And we're probably in an era of bigger government than we have in the past because of all the things we've had to do with the probably upwards of $6 trillion from the government into the economy, either through the legislation or through the feds. I think we've got political risk that's growing between urban and rural, which affects our membership. We're going to have to build bridges, and we have a huge educational opportunity ahead of us. And I think on the global trade front, we're going to see increased nationalism. We're going to see increased populism. That's going to affect the supply chains, I think, especially in pharmaceutical, but it very well may affect the supply chains in terms of food and agriculture as well. So we're going to see a changing landscape in many different ways.
No, I really appreciate your comments, particularly the trust piece of it, Michael. I think, we've talked to our members, they've had an opportunity to be front and center with consumers in probably ways we never would have anticipated. And there's a halo effect because we've been, seen as very supportive across the board, feeding their families, helping their communities, and things like that. But so we keep talking about how do we, build on that relationship. One of the things I want to share with you and kind of get your thoughts, both of you, is on an earlier podcast with a food analyst from Rabobank. And they always tend to, in my opinion, the reason I like, paying attention to them is because they're always pushing the envelope. They're always asking the uncomfortable question. And the question that they asked, and they talked about, people are going to be even more health and wellness conscious from a perspective of how is their lifestyle, whether it's exercise or in our case, food, how does that, how do they be healthier so that could then fight off a future virus? So, I don't know that we're all going to become, fitness nuts, overnight. But, I think that trend is something that, if people can, consume healthy, balanced diets as part of their lifestyle, that can ward off, chronic illnesses as well as, potentially other, diseases that might come at us, on COVID. I'm curious to see if you're hearing from your members on that, or maybe what your personal thoughts would be.
That's a very interesting perspective on it. That is the COVID twist to something that in the meat industry we talk about and deal with all the time, which is really the nutritiousness, the value to one's diet of meat products. We're obviously thrilled that the dietary guidelines continue to support lean meat as part of a healthy dietary pattern. But I think that for folks in general across the populace, having a balanced diet, an adequate amount of exercise, which I could use more of right now. I will just tell you, COVID has not been kind. But I would say that, underlying health conditions that have exacerbated, as we have read, the transmission of the virus, or the severity of the virus in some cases, we still have to deal with those on an ongoing basis. Obesity, diabetes, all of the things that go together with lack of moderation, I suppose. So we're not getting questions about that related to COVID and meat per se. But I think the messaging and the research and the things that we already are talking about with our consuming public would support meat as a healthy part of a healthy diet that would hopefully help with weight control and all the issues that go along with obesity.
I agree with Juliana on obesity and especially diabetes. I think we're on the very beginning of a lot more attention to diabetes, type 2 diabetes and obesity, and all of the metabolic medical issues associated with type 2 diabetes. And I think that is going to put a spotlight on sugar. So as we think about health and wellness going forward, I think sugar is going to come under, as I said, increased scrutiny is going to happen in our industry. Sugar is going to be at the forefront of receiving the increased scrutiny. I think protein has had a place and will become ever more important as we go forward. I think the profile on fat is changing as we have more and more research on obesity and the causes of obesity, and a changing viewpoint on the role of fat. I think as we think about technology, as technology comes into the consumer space as well, prescription nutrition will become a bigger player as we go forward. And I think on the export markets, protein in the developing world, as the economies there improve, their ability to purchase additional sources of protein will increase global trade bases on health and wellness as well. So I think those are some of the issues that are out there in health and wellness, Rob. But I think there'll be a greater interest and focus on health and wellness in general on the part of consumers. And obviously sustainability, the broadest measures of sustainability are going to play into that as well. We'll continue to have alternative proteins. We'll continue to have even maybe the same proteins instead of the animal made by biotechnology. they'll have a place in the marketplace. Consumers will demand those kinds of added choices. But Julianne and I have another area of sustainability that we have to be mindful of as well, and that's the ethical, humane treatment of the animals. And that's going to become ever more focus of media and consumers as well.
No, I think it's a really interesting point that you raise. Particularly, we like to hold ourselves up. Bread and rolls and wheat, flour sort of being the original plant-based protein. But I do think the concern about sugars and sweeteners is very legitimate and real. And I do think we've got a lot of work cut out for us, respectively, as our industries. Because the other thing that we all know is consumers, even highly motivated consumers, it just takes a while for their taste profiles to change. And if they're used to certain products in a certain way, those companies are going to have to adapt. But sometimes that change takes some time. And so I just think that's a great call out, Michael, is to look at that, the issue around sugar. And I'm sure that we will, as the dietary guidelines process goes forward here in the next couple of months, we will probably hear a little bit more about it. Speaking of government agencies action, we have had, I don't even know in the last 6 months. Yes, sir.
I didn't. I was going to let you finish here, but I don't in any way take my comments as being taking a swipe at the bakeries. And by no means, we certainly use our share of sugar in the dairy industry. Think ice cream, think flavored milks. And we too are going to have to take a look at how we're doing that, and if there are other ways we can satisfy consumer demands.
No, I didn't take any offense, Michael. I knew what you were saying. So,
Yeah.
But I want to switch a little bit. We have had over the last 6 months countless phone calls, webinars, and the like with various government agencies. Primarily FDA and USDA, which have huge oversight of our respective industries as well as the broader food industry. I'm just wondering, as we start to wrap up here, what takeaway do you have? What have we learned through this process that we may be able to approach our government agency partners and come back to them to implement that might make our lives a little easier, might instill a higher level of trust on the part of the consumer, but then also, most importantly, how could we react even quicker should the next pandemic or whatever the case may be come about? Juliana, do you want to kick that off?
Sure. We have this unique situation, I think, in the meat industry, in that the president issued the executive order invoking the Defense Production Act on behalf of really all of the essential food supply, but really focused on the packing and processing plants. At the time, we were down about 50% in slaughter capacity, which was enormous and unforeseen, backing up the animals and really threatening the ability to process meat to keep us going. And what we saw as a result of that was an ability of our federal government agencies to informally engage with state and local officials, state and local health officials, state and local labor officials, governor's offices, and it was more effective more quickly than I think anyone had anticipated when things were really rough. So I would say that both on the local side, with our member companies making proactive communications with local health authorities, as well as on the federal side, I think the ability of the USDA, FDA, and CDC in some cases to take on the challenge of keeping people safe and keeping the processing plants running was extremely eye-opening, I would say, to the federal officials as well. So I think going forward, asking for more informal interaction among state, federal, local officials, and proactively reaching out for education and transparency has worked well in the meat industry for getting us back on our feet more quickly than we even anticipated.
It's a great point.
I'd pick up on the last point Juliana made. I agree with her points. I think she's in a unique place to be both USDA, FDA. I think what we saw during this pandemic, the role of local health departments, and quite honestly, many of the local health departments didn't really know what happened inside many of our dairy facilities. So our members have been very proactive at inviting them in, showing them videos, educating them as to what actually happens inside one of our facilities, the steps we take every single day, and the added steps we've taken during this pandemic has been extremely helpful. I think it's been helpful to both our industry and to the local health departments and the state health departments. I want to come back, Rob, to your question from a FDA perspective. I think there are several things that happened during this pandemic. First off, I think we say it a lot, but I think it actually became evident during this crisis that we do truly have a mutual shared interest, industry and FDA, and that is we both every single day have the objective of putting the safest food supply possible to the consumers globally. Our industry can't afford to do otherwise, and the regulators have the same desire. I think we also saw the importance of speed of decision making and having people in these agencies that will take the personal responsibility and accountability to say, yes, we're going to do that, and the buck stops with me, and I'll take the responsibility for having made that decision. Or I will drive that change with CDC, with OSHA, with FDA, with USDA, wherever it may be. We also saw that when we backed off on some of the inspections, all the things that were necessary because of people, movements, requirements, etc., we didn't see any drop off on food safety for the American consumer. So I believe coming out of this, we need to take those same lessons learned during the pandemic and apply them on a go-forward basis. And to me, the overarching thing that comes out of this is we need an increased speed of regulatory decision-making and personal accountability for being willing to stand up and make those decisions inside these regulatory agencies. Because quite frankly, the role of technology, and if technology is turbocharged during this crisis, after this crisis, as I said earlier, the role of technology is increasing the speed of innovation, and it's far, far outpacing the regulators' ability to regulate or their willingness to regulate. And we've got to change that mindset.
Those are two excellent points. So I think, Juliana talked about the, just sort of, how we've continued to innovate and operate and recover. But I think, Michael, your point about, that critical decision-making ability internally. And we've all been navigating through the alphabet soup of the food regulators, if you will. I come back to a call that we had with Commissioner Hahn, FDA Commissioner Hahn, where, he was so appreciative and his exact words were, we know that we have been able to lean and rely on you and that you have done everything you can to keep the food supply safe. And again, a lot of people don't, and we certainly need to be very careful. A lot of people don't realize that, it was the food industry leaning very heavily and doubling down on their good manufacturing practices, their food safety processes in place that really allowed us to do that. It probably wasn't flawless, but it was probably as flawless as it could possibly be. And my hope is that we can build on that. And again, that's the trust, hopefully, that consumers have, but also the trust that regulators have. So then how do we adapt the structure to really lean even more heavily on what the food industry already does as part of its DNA? But then also, how do we get that more flexible, quicker decision making put in place? I think if we could accomplish both of those in the next few months, that would be enormously helpful to our industry. I'm going to say thank you to both of you. This has been a fantastic conversation. You don't always have the time to sort of step back, which is why I love this format where we can sort of step back and answer some of the bigger questions. I think Katie might have another question or two, but again, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Rob, thank you. Your continued wrangling of all of us. Now it's once a week, but early on, 3 times a week, pulling everybody together and being a leader in this group has been invaluable to all of us. So kudos to you for your guidance through COVID for all of us in the food and beverage industry.
Yeah, I would second that, Juliana. Rob, you do an amazing job of pulling us together. I am especially appreciative of the trust and the candor we have as the Food Trade Association CEOs.
And thank you, guys. Like Rob said, I do have a question that I've been thinking about a lot as we're gearing up for school. A lot of public schools are starting, a lot of them are not. And I've been thinking a lot about the children and families who rely on school meal programs throughout the country. I know that food insecurity has been a big issue throughout this whole crisis, and it doesn't look like that's going to really end soon for a lot of different areas. And you were talking about industry really coming together to help solve some problems. Is this a problem that industry is coming together to help solve cohesively, or what are we doing?
Well, I can go first on that if you like. I think going forward, 2 big issues that will influence the trajectory going forward. One is a vaccine, and 2 is schools. Will we have a vaccine? Yes or no? How effective will it be? How many people will take it? How many doses will we have? Even if we have enough doses, how many people will take it? And what kind of reporting will there be about its safety and efficacy? So I think there's that one piece will have a lot of influence. The next piece is the schools. 15,000 school districts, 62 of the 100, I've already said they're going to be, the top 100 are going to be virtual. Some will start. We saw this with Georgia, and now students are testing positive. What are the health implications of testing positive if you're young? And might that be health implications down the road longer term? All those are unknowns, but I got a feeling that this school situation is going to change. They're going to open and maybe then close. They're going to not open and then open later. Public schools, private schools, the legal implications, the whole school thing is the second big, to me, the big determinant of as we go forward. Food service, we have been working with the food service to try to do the extended summer meals program. My sense is USDA is going to have to extend those feeding programs. They're going to have to do more waivers because there's a lot of kids that the main nutrition they receive is through the school nutrition programs. So I think you're going to see more done with USDA as the schools go virtual starting this school year. So I think we'll see extended feeding programs and we'll see extended waivers.
Yeah, I am pleased that the public schools are continuing to work in their communities to provide pickups. But it's not helpful for everyone if the kids aren't in school and aren't able to access those programs. So it's going to be incumbent on all of us to do what we can in our communities. We've been involved with Feeding America, as have been many of our, I'm sure, all of our collective members in the local communities. That's been huge. The partnership with Feeding America, as we've seen the demand on those services, out the roof. I think that many of our companies have committed resources to their local communities and have left it up to the communities to decide how to deploy it. And I think a lot of those have gone for feeding families. So it's not something that I think collectively we have taken positions on, to answer your question, but I do think that it's very, very important for all of us, and every company in my organization is doing something toward addressing hunger.
Yeah, I would jump in and say that we've had a number of members who have worked with their local school districts who are adapting, like everybody else during the COVID pandemic, to make sure that, those essential baked goods are provided as part of the school meal programs. My hope is that between USDA and the Department of Education, that some of those best practices are being shared because not every school district has been able to figure out the logistics of taking the school meal programs outside of the day-to-day inside the physical side of the building, if you will. So I think more innovation to come there. Certainly, the bakers that really supply a lot of those wholesome, healthy bread and rolls to schools have been involved in that and will be part of that solution. But again, I think the other thing that Juliana mentioned is one of the things I've been really most proud of our industry is the partnerships. Even the companies, I talked about the food service company whose business went from 100% to 20%, literally overnight. Those companies in the food service side have just continued to produce product and donated it to the local food bank, to the Feeding America program. So even though their businesses have been severely impacted by COVID, they're continuing to serve and feed their local communities, which I think is probably one of the untold stories of the pandemic. I do think we've got some work to do to figure out the school side of it. But again, I think if we can get the right people in the room, there's a lot of smart folks in our respective industries on the logistics side that can really work with state and local governments to make that happen.
As we mentioned at the end of part 1, we are starting a new segment on the show called the Great Bake Debate, where we poll you all, our listeners, on a baked food related debate. Our next question is, how do you pronounce the buttery, flaky pastry that often comes in a crescent shape? Croissant or croissant? Go to baketothefuture.org/debate to submit your answer, and we will announce the results on the next show.
I think that, maybe some people also try to pretend that they speak French and they're like croissant, like kind of this like French oomph. Anyway, I'm excited to see how people deem the word should be said. And on Bake to the Future, we do try to bring you a look at the future of the baking industry from all angles. And if you have an idea for the show, let us know. You can leave us a voicemail at baketothefuture.org or send us an email at hello@americanbakers.org.
You can also leave a voicemail at baketothefuture.org to let us know how you pronounce croissant.
Oh, that's a good idea. And we can play some of the pronunciations on the show. Good one. I like it.
Another reason to go to baketothefuture.org.
Bake to the Future is brought to you by the American Bakers Association in partnership with Human Factor. To hear upcoming and past episodes, go to baketothefuture.org. Bake to the Future is produced by Haley Blumenreich. Audio engineer is Blake Alton. And A Slice of the Action is written by the American Bakers Association's Government Relations team.